Wallace. For this afternoon's meditation session, I'd like to return back to straight Shamatha. And a very simple, very kind of honest, basic, straightforward, no-nonsense method of Shamatha. And that's mindfulness of breathing. In the Pali Canon, there was no meditation that the Buddha taught more frequently than mindfulness of breathing. According to the Pali Canon, on the night that he achieved enlightenment, he was practicing mindfulness of breathing. And on the day that he achieved parinirvana, he was practicing mindfulness of breathing. So it couldn't be that trivial. It couldn't be just for beginners. In fact, it turns out to be really quite extraordinarily deep. And in terms of posture, we see the Buddha classically depicted there in the cross-legged sitting posture, Vajrasana, or the full lotus position, for very good reason. It's classic, it's very, very effective. But of course he didn't die in that posture. He chose to lie down when he was blind. He could have, I think he had it in him to sit up if he wanted to. But he chose not to, he lay down. Maybe that was to show a bit of flexibility. So between these two postures that we've been exploring, the sitting and the supine, I'd really like to encourage everyone, those here and those listening by podcast, don't give up on the Shavasana. Don't give up on that one. Except for two cases. Then they really don't, maybe it's just not so important. For those of you who are quite sure you're not going to die, and those quite sure you'll never be injured or sick again. For you then, maybe not so important. But for everybody else, if you're seriously injured or sick or you're dying, chances are not very high you're going to be sitting upright in the full lotus. You might. I wouldn't bet on it. You'll probably be lying down. And it will be really a shame if, when that day comes, you've still not learned how to meditate in the supine position. Because that guarantees you're going to, check out from this life, and check out in the economy class. Not nice. I know economy class. And years ago, early 80s, 1981, I trained for about 3 months, 2.5, 3 months with B.K.S. Iyengar in his ashram in Pune. Very intensively. I was practicing yoga for like 5 hours a day. And had a fair amount. I was fortunate enough to have a lot of personal instruction from him. And he made a number of comments, I remember vividly, but one of them in particular was that he said, "You're not ready to meditate until you've mastered Shavasana." Anybody can just lie down, but that's not Shavasana. It's not just a physical posture. It is clearly, it's a yogic practice. It's not just, nap time. And so it means that you're fully aware, you're fully present, you're conscious in your body, you're aware of that whole embodiment after having finished all your other asanas. And this is your culminating asana. And you're there, and he taught it with the same precision that he taught any other asana, which means a lot. And you're fully present, and then you master that. He said, okay, then you can consider moving on to pranayama and meditation and so on. It was very sequential, very much of a lamrimba, following the lamrim within the yoga tradition. I think there's a lot to be said for that. To know what it's like to so profoundly relax, so deeply relax in your body that it's total meltdown, and yet not even have a dip in the level of your clarity, your cognizance, your wakefulness. That you're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, as we say in English. Very, very bright, clear, and yet body totally relaxed. This is not something that comes naturally, especially to us living in our modern world. We're not at all. And so that's worth cultivating. And in that, and then of course the chest is open and the spine is straight and everything's open. Even your palms are up, which opens up the hinges here at the shoulders, so everything's open. And in that total relaxation, you can really see what it's like, with no impediment, no constraint, no constraint on the breathing at all, just wide open, right? And so the breathing then your posture is such that the breathing can really flow unimpededly and effortlessly. You can really taste what it means like to breathe egolessly, releasing all control, breathing with a total sense of surrender, not only during the out-breath, which is not that difficult, but total sense of relax and release and surrender during the in-breath. The in-breath is just coming in, but not pulled in, not inhibited, and there's no agent doing it. There's no inhaler. It's just anymore if the breeze is flowing this way, we're not inhaling the breeze this way, it's just flowing this way, it's just happening. And so, if you've mastered that, if you really tasted that, and then you know how to slowly roll out of the Shavasana. You don't jerk yourself up, but you roll over onto your side, and then you face down, and then you use your lower hip as the pivot, and you gently roll, smoothly roll out of that posture, for example, to the sitting posture. If while sitting you have virtually the same degree of release, of softness, of relaxation, and then you're sitting upright, then that's good. That's excellent. And then you can have that same unimpeded flow of the breathing, which is really crucial. But if you don't have that in the sitting, go back in the supine and stay. Continue practicing until you really mastered that. And until you have broken the habit of, I'm in the supine, I get drowsy. That's just a Pavlovian response. It's just a habit. That's all it is. It's just a habit. And that's why I suggest never use Shavasana for anything other than practice. So by habit, every time you're in that posture, it must be for yoga or meditation. Any other supine position, any other lying down position, that's fine. Watch television, read a book, fall asleep, whatever you like. But not this one. This is like taken. Now here's a hypothesis that you can test. I'm going to go back to a parallel I've drawn before, and I'm just going to keep on re-emphasizing it. That we know that in settling the mind in its natural state, when you're putting 8, 10, 12 hours in a day, day after day, month after month, what happens? Well, you know that over time, your mind is settling in its natural state with a lot of spikes and ups and downs and spikes and upheavals and so forth, outer, inner, secret and so forth. But overall, the trajectory is you're going from, if you remember the metaphors, from a cascading waterfall to a mountain brook rushing quickly down a mountain gorge, to a river flowing serenely in the valley, to an ocean unmoved by waves, to Mount Meru, total stillness. And so in terms of the activity of the mind, it's called javana, you might recall the term, the activity, the kinetic energy of the mind, the movements of the mind. They're going from being very rambunctious and sporadic and up and down and upheavals and calm and happy and sad, good day, bad day. And then over time, it's just evening out, until your mind slips into its natural state. Mental activity goes zero. You're left with the substrate, and virtue awareness in upon your substrate consciousness, and you've achieved shamatha. That was the whole path right there. So you see that at any given day, it could be a spike, it could be a dip, it could be an upheaval, it could be a really happy day. But overall, that's the trajectory. That's how it works. That's how it works. And so that's fact. I mean, that's experience that's been corroborated thousands and thousands of times. It's a very well-run experiment. So the data are in. They're published. It's a done deal. Right? Now we have mindfulness of breathing, and I'm suggesting a parallel here, which then it can be tested. And that is, especially with this full body awareness, but I would not confine it to that particular method, that when you go into this type of sense of ease, this type of sense, exactly the same quality of awareness that you bring to the mind, and the emotions, memories, desires coming up, not trying to regulate, not trying to suppress, not trying to accentuate, not trying to fix the mind, you're just bringing the awareness to it, and the awareness you tweak in terms of overcoming excitation and laxity, but the contents, what's happening in the mind, you don't mess with it, right? That's settling the mind. We'll get to it soon, but I think I've given away the plot. And so similarly with the breath, that when you go into that mode of relaxation, which is most easily accessible in the supine position, but can be sustained in the sitting, that watch the flow of the breath and see if the following is true. Okay? I don't know whether it's true or not. Maybe it is. Check. And that is, as you go into that type of meltdown, that type of total release, but total presence, same quality awareness, stillness, observing motion, simultaneous experience of stillness of your awareness and the movements within the body, and it could be just the apertures of the nostrils, but here I'll just emphasize the Sanghas method. the movements, the fluctuations corresponding to respiration. Watch the fluctuations, watch the spikes. And here's the suggestion. It might turn out like this, that when you first sit down, the breathing is fairly strong. So long in-breath, long out-breath, and then on occasion it might slip into short breath, long in-breath, short out-breath, ba-ba-ba-ba-ba, short in-breath, long out-breath, pause, in-breath. Kind of like the mind at the beginning, cascading waterfall, all kinds of stuff coming in, okay? A lot of variation. And don't mess with it. You're watching your body balance itself by way of respiration. You're watching your subtle body, which is all about the flow of energies, balancing itself out. And what you're seeing on the surface is breath, but this is the body balancing, healing itself. And then over time, and here's the hypothesis you can test if you like, over time, as you really are experiencing not only the physical ease, but a sense of mental ease, just looseness, like loose, relaxed, like that, calm, just like loose, relaxed, comfortable. Then you may find, the breath is getting more rhythmic now. The initial kind of spikes and up and down and variations and so forth of long breath, short breath, and pause, all that kind of business. Well, that's kind of sorted itself out, and now I'm getting nice long in-breath, long out-breath, long in-breath. Maybe that'll happen. Maybe that corresponds to the first three of the qualities of shamatha, and that is relaxation. Maybe. Could be. Continue. Then just simply continue. Noting long in-breath, long out-breath. Long in-breath, long out-breath. You don't have to talk about it, but you should know that without having to conceptualize it. And you have that basis. You've got that basis in ease, relaxation, looseness, comfort. And you're just noting, nice, long in-breath, long out-breath. And then, of course, as the mind is at ease, relaxed, then the turbulence of the mind, the sheer volume, amount of rumination, obsessive-compulsive ideation subsides. The amount of coarse excitation, where you're just losing the object entirely, your mind got thrown out and spin off into excitation or this or that, that's subsiding. And as the mind is really calming down, excitation is subsiding, stability is increasing, then there's less wear and tear on the mind, less friction, less effort, and you may find now the body is really calm and relaxed and quiet. The mind, in terms of the volume of rumination and so forth, getting really, really quiet, which means that you just are not giving much effort, which means that you don't need as much air. And so you're approximating falling asleep now. As far as the body knows, the body doesn't know anything, but metaphorically, the body says, I think we're falling asleep now. And the mind is getting really calm. And so then you may find that either suddenly or gradually you may find, short in-breath, short out-breath, short in-breath, short out-breath, short in-breath, short out-breath. Shallow, short, and not sporadic. Not bit short and then long, 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 short, 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 long, long. Not like that. Short, 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 short. Maybe that corresponds to stability. Could be. Want to check? If that happens, then you recall what the Buddha said. After he said, when the in-breath is short, note that it's short. When the out-breath is short, note that it's short. Then he said, attending to the whole body, breathe in, attending to the whole body, breathe out. Now's the time for continuity. When you slip into that shallow breathing, and it's really quite consistent, it's a flow of shallow breathing, short breathing, who knows, might be 15 cycles per minute. When that happens, then you say, okay, now I know my marching orders, I know what to do now. Stay with it. Now's the time, just be there like the rider on his mount, like the horseman on his horse. Stay with it. Stay with the whole in-breath, out-breath, in-breath. Just stay with it. Stay the course. Maintain continuity. Deepen that stability. Deepen that stability. And that may be corresponding to, out of relaxation, stability and clarity. That may correspond to stability. And your breathing may correspond very, very closely to the type of breathing that you slip into when you're in normal, non-lucid, dreamless sleep. Right? Now, just giving you one hypothesis after another. I'll betcha, here's my working hypothesis, that when you're in deep dreamless sleep, and you do slip into this fairly rapid but shallow, very restful breathing, 15 cycles or so per minute, I'll betcha, if you're deep asleep for an hour and a half, what have you, that I'll bet you over that an hour and a half, I'll bet it does not get shallower and shallower and shallower. I bet it doesn't. I bet it just kind of steady stays out at that cycle and then the same amplitude. I'll bet you. That's my expectation. I don't know, but I bet you I think so. And that's as good as it gets. That's what you get deep sleep for. You wake up fresh as a daisy, mind is clear, body's rested, and good. I had a good night's sleep, right? That's as good as it gets. But shamatha is not just to get a good night's sleep. Shamatha is to achieve shamatha. That's accessing the substrate and substrate consciousness, which you do access in deep dreamless sleep, but not knowingly. And why? Clarity is not there. Clarity is not there. You got relaxation and stability. You got no clarity. You don't even know you're asleep. That's not much clear. You're not clear of anything. No explicit awareness of anything. And so that's where shamatha and deep sleep part paths. And imagine now you're fully cognizant, you're clearly, luminously aware in a continuous way, attending the whole breath, whole body I breathe in, attending the whole body I breathe out. And now you're really refining, you're fine-tuning the clarity, which is getting sharper and sharper and sharper. Stability getting finer and finer and finer. Relaxation going deeper and deeper and deeper, which now is not happening in deep dreamless sleep, but does happen in shamatha. You've now set out on a new uncharted ground. That in that regard, then on the shamatha path, then the breath is getting shallower and shallower. Same frequency, but really, really fine. Really fine. In other words, if you're attending those tactile sensations, whether at the nostrils or whether full body, they're getting subtle. And if you remain engaged, your mind's going to get subtle. And then the sensations will get more subtle, because less air coming in. And your attention will get more subtle. The feedback loop. And then you're going to get really, really subtle. Until, then you achieve shamatha. And your awareness of the body of tactile sensations vanishes. And you're just resting in the substrate consciousness. And you can, if you wish, still be aware of the rhythm of the breath, even without being aware of the tactile sensations of the breath. So maybe that's true. Don't know. You want to check. Let's practice. Wallace. So we're now going to switch tracks to a little kind of surprise entry for a retreat that was supposed to be just focusing on Panchen Lozang Chökyi's text and the Naked Awareness by Karma Chagmé. We're introducing a special guest star from an entirely different text, but again one composed by Karma Chagmé Rinpoche. And as you can see in the footnote down on the bottom of the page, this presentation, it's 20 pages or so, this presentation is chapter 15. I never saw the first 14. Rinpoche just went right to 15. Of Karma Chagmé's great commentary to Mingyur Dorje. This was his premier disciple, incredible prodigy. His disciple's text called Buddhahood in the Palm of the Hand, Sangye Lakchang. And this is Sangye Lakchang Delchen, the great commentary to Buddhahood in the Palm of the Hand. And so, as I mentioned previously, I'd known Gyaltsen Rinpoche for a few years, really because his principal attendant and his wife was one of my oldest friends in Dharma, a woman named Sangye Kondo. We've known each other since about 1972 in India, so old Dharma buddies. And so we had an ongoing friendship, very much alive to this day. And so I would drop in on her once every year or 2 or 3, whatever, and she would be with her Lama, and then I would meet with Gyaltsen Rinpoche, and we would chat. I was kind of checking him out. But then it was in 1990 when I first went to really receive teachings from him. And this was in San Jose, as I recall, in California. And Sangye Khanda was his interpreter. She interpreted him for years. And the topic for that first teaching was dream yoga. And I'd received teachings on this previously from Dzogchen Rinpoche, back when he taught the 6 yogas in Naropa, 6 dharmas of Naropa, back in 1978. But again, it was just way over my head. And Geshe Rabten said, don't even try to practice it, forget it. And so 12 years went by, and then Gyatso Rinpoche taught it. And then it just really struck home. And then I asked him to be my Lama. It's just like, oh, I get it. The dream yoga is really both, it's Vipashyana practice. Dream yoga is Vipashyana practice. There's daytime dream yoga, nighttime dream yoga. Daytime dream yoga is daytime Vipashyana practice, and nighttime dream yoga is nighttime Vipashyana practice. And it really struck home. So I really felt I'd found another Lama that I wanted to have a strong connection with. And so then not long after that, then Gyatso Rinpoche invited me asked me to come down with him to Hollywood, to a center there, just for a weekend retreat, and to serve as an interpreter. I wound up having the privilege, the great privilege, of serving as his primary interpreter in the Bay Area for 7 years. But this was the first teaching, and it wasn't in the Bay Area, it was in Hollywood. And it was entirely up to him what to teach, and he chose this chapter and then the next chapter, which is on Vipassana. But this is the first one he taught. So the first teachings I received from him, and for which I was serving as interpreter. And I was just reflecting on this a little bit, and going back to, for me, the early days, it was in 1972 that I received my first instruction, detailed, quite definitive, systematic, clearly laid out, teachings on Shamatha, the 9 stages, everything in crystal clear presentation by Geshe Taige. And I gave these teachings, it blew me away, because I'd never heard anything like this before. We just don't have this in the West. This is nothing like it. You'd have to go back to Pythagoras, but even he didn't teach it. He probably realized Shamatha, almost certainly did. Didn't teach it, we don't know what he taught much. So Geshe Taige taught Shamatha, and it made a very deep impression on me. And then when he's coming towards the end of his teaching, then he said, well, let's practice a little bit. We have these 1-hour sessions every morning, 1-hour sessions. It's six days a week. And he just immersed us in Dharma. So he said, well, let's practice a little bit. There were about, I think, 8 of us. We were in the 1-year class, 8 of us, as I recall. And so he said, oh, cool, he's going to practice. Let's practice Shamatha. Good. So Geshe Taige is up there on his little Dharma throne, and we're sitting on our cushions. And he sits down there like a stone Buddha, just boom. And we're sitting, and we're going, boom. And 15 minutes goes by. And I won't speak for the other ones, I'm not clairvoyant, but I thought, that was good, okay. That was fine. Good. Good. Yeah. That was good thing. And half an hour goes by, and my body's getting pretty uncomfortable. And that was nice. An hour goes by, my body's racked with pain. And I'm like, 2 hours goes by. It's excruciating, because we're not supposed to lie down. He never talk about supine position. 3 hours goes by. He's sitting like a stone Buddha, not a flinch. And I'm just writhing in agony, pretending to sit upright in meditation. Well, what I'm really hearing is my body just screaming, what the hell are you doing to me? And after 3 hours, sitting like a stone Buddha, then he goes like this. Shamatha's not so easy. That was my introduction to Shamatha. I went off and clapped my hands for a couple of years. Buddhist school dialectics. Got tired of doing that when it meditated. About 1.5 years. Went off to Switzerland with Geshe Rabten, trained with him for 5 years, served as his interpreter for 5 years. And then he taught many topics, but he taught Shamatha. So the nail was sunk, and then Geshe Rabten countersunk the nail, just hammered it in. So I got really inspired. And I was also kind of saturated with undigested knowledge. I've been studying flat out for 10 years pretty much. And so I wrote to His Holiness, who was already my root guru at that time. He gave me full ordination, and I said, Your Holiness, I just want to go off and meditate, and I want to practice Shamatha. And what shall I do? Shall I go back to America? No visa problems. Stay in Switzerland? But I know Geshe Rabten's going to call me back soon. Or shall I go to India? And he said, well, come to India, I'll teach you. So I zipped off to India and went into my first Shamatha retreat. and it was directly under the guidance of His Holiness. After 6 months, then I had a non-renewable visa. The Indian government told me to get out. So, but I had 5 months of strict retreat. His Holiness was guiding me. And my nearest neighbor was Gelug Mahamudra, the yogi who spent about 25 years in retreat. So I got doused there. Doused in Shamatha there. Went down to Sri Lanka. Had the enormously good fortune to come under the guidance of Balagota Ananda Maitreya. Balagota, he was like the greatest teacher in the whole country. Great monk, great scholar, great meditator. And he was retired, so he was living out in a little temple, and he let me come and stay with him, so he trained me in Shamatha. And then I trained with Iyengar in yoga. And then after some time went back to America and organized a one-year retreat. And Gelug Mahamudra came, the one I had met. He came and he led a one-year Shamatha retreat. So he and I were living together for a year. And he taught Shamatha spectacularly. He gave a lot of personal guidance. I did a lot of interpreting for him. And then a couple of years go by. And then I received teaching Dream Yoga from Gyatro Rinpoche. And then the first teaching he gives is Shamatha. Right? So if you're wondering why I'm a Shamatha junkie, I've kind of been molded that way. From Geshe Ngawin Taige and His Holiness Dalai Lama and Geshe Rabten and Genlam Rinpa and Gyatro Rinpoche, they just, so if I emphasize Shamatha, there's a good reason for that. That's what happened to me. And I'm very happy it happened to me. I mean, this was all voluntary. Nobody ever coerced me in any way. Just, if you like it, you like it. If you don't like it, it's cool, whatever. So that's where this is coming from. And so this is the chapter that he taught in the Shambhala Center in Hollywood, 1991, probably. 91, 90, like that. So you see chapter 15, so we know, we can kind of surmise that what comes before this is a whole bunch of presentations of preliminary practices. What comes after is definitely Vipashyana. I know that because he taught it. And then comes after that, well, this is Mahāmudrā Dzogchen. So you know what's coming after that in principle. The text, as far as I know, has never been translated. And I wasn't even able to find it on the Tibetan Buddhist Resource Center or anything. So here we go. The cultivation of Shamatha by Karma Chagmé. Lived in the 17th century. He was a contemporary of the Fifth Dalai Lama, and one of the greatest. He's cited by both Nyingmapas and Kagyupas as a great scholar and contemplative, a master, true master. And his erudition is really utterly amazing, which he shows. So here we jump right in. Then, so here we are, after the first 14 chapters, he says, then, first of all, in the presentation of the instructions on the actual topic. So, there we go, actual topic. You remember that? You have the preliminaries, and then you have the actual topic, and then you maybe have some concluding stuff like dedication of merit, what have you. So, actual topic, well then we know, okay, now we're going into the main show, the main event, and it's starting with Shamatha. The actual topic, that's what that means, the muji. So now that we've gone to the main body of practice, the centerpiece, there are instructions on the breakthrough. Nowadays I translate this as cutting through. Either one is fine. Cutting through, it's tekchut, the first of the two phases of Dzogchen practice. Bona fide, classic Dzogchen practice consists of two phases. The cutting through to the original purity of pristine awareness, that's realizing Rigpa. And the tut gel, the direct crossing over to the spontaneous actualization of all the qualities of Buddhahood. And the direct crossing over is you're actually leaping from one bodhisattva bhumi to another. It's called the leap over or the direct crossing over. Ordinarily you go from the first bhumi, second bhumi, third bhumi, boom, 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 like marching along. In this, you leap from the first to the fifth, from the fifth to the eighth. You leap like a deer, much faster. So if you're fully qualified, as Yangtang Rinpoche said, if you're fully qualified tekchut practitioner, you're really actually, this is what he said, were there, so if I say anything incorrectly, if I got it wrong, you actually do feel free to correct me. Please do correct me, because this is a young Rinpoche, I don't want to mess with what he said. But he said, if you're really a qualified tekchut practitioner, you can dwell in Rigpa. Okay, and optimally you would be a Vidyadhara. Then he said, if full-time practice, 20 years, you should be a Buddha by practicing Tutgyal. Remember? 20 years. But the fine print was, if you're fully qualified. That could take a while. That could take at least, some months. or years or decades or lifetime. So, but here we are. So there are instructions on the breakthrough. So now we place this now in the context of Dzogchen. Breakthrough is Dzogchen terminology. It's not Mahamudra's terminology. There are instructions on the breakthrough or cutting through, which are common to Shamatha, Mahamudra, and Dzogchen. Okay? So common ground. Mahamudra from the Kagyu tradition, Dzogchen from the Nyingma tradition. So these are common. Shamatha is common to all three. And the teachings here are common to both Mahamudra and Dzogchen. Specifically, the texture itself, the cutting through itself, you find that which is equivalent to that in Mahamudra, that which is that in Dzogchen, and there are the uncommon direct crossing over instructions. Those are unique to Dzogchen. You don't find it anywhere else. Not in highest Yoga Tantra, not in Gui Samaja, not in Mahamudra, not in the 6 dharmas of Naropa. You don't find it anywhere. It's unique, and it's therefore in the Nyingma tradition. Anyone is welcome to practice it. You don't have to become a full-fledged Nyingmapa, but they are the wellspring of that. It goes back to Padmasambhava, Vimanamitra, and so on. So there he's laid out the big picture here, but very briefly. Moreover, in the first of these, that is in the cutting through, the first of the 2 major phases of Dzogchen meditation, in the first 2 of these, between the cutting through and direct crossing over, there are the 3 topics of Shamatha, Vipashyana, and the union of the 2. Shamatha predated the Buddha by centuries. Vipashyana was invented by the Buddha, discovered by the Buddha, and the union of the 2, and the powerful efficacy of the union of Shamatha Vipashyana was discovered by the Buddha. That was one of his great innovations in the contemplative heritage of India. I think that is simply a true statement. It would be very hard to contest. Did not exist before him. After him, anybody is welcome to borrow, but he gets the credit for that. The union of Shamatha Vipashyana is that which purifies the mind irreversibly. So among those 3 topics, first, there is the presentation of Shamatha. For without Shamatha, the mental afflictions are not suppressed, or one could say subdued, either way you like. Without Shamatha, the mental afflictions are not suppressed. The virtues of extrasensory perception do not arise, various types of clairvoyance, knowing others' minds, recalling your past life, remote viewing, remote hearing, clairaudience, clairvoyance. You don't get those in a robust, continuous, durable fashion. You might get spikes, flashes, but they're not dependable unless you have shamatha. The virtues of extrasensory perception do not arise, and wisdom does not realize emptiness. Once again, you may get spikes, you may get glimpses. Sure, why not? You could. You can get glimpses of Rigpa, glimpses of no self, of identity, glimpses of non-duality. Yeah, for sure. But wisdom does not realize emptiness. That is wisdom just where you're living in it, you're sustaining it. Without shamatha, not going to happen. Without shamatha, there is no path. First of all, shamatha must be cultivated. As stated in the Bodhicharyavatara, a guide to the Bodhisattva way of life by Shantideva, the most widely studied, taught, and practiced text in all of Tibetan Buddhism. I think that's a safe statement. Because all 4 traditions practice it, teach it. There's no text more strongly emphasized. And there are a lot of texts, thousands and thousands of texts. This is the classic of classics. This is the text that His Holiness Dalai Lama requested from Kunu Lama Rinpoche. And so there it states in the beginning of the 8th chapter, which is on dhyana, on meditation, but the name is dhyana, as in first dhyana, second dhyana, and so forth. There Shantideva says right at the beginning of the chapter, a person whose mind is distracted dwells between the fangs of the mental afflictions. So one can really linger here. A person whose mind is still prone to attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, falling into excitation, mind wandering, rumination, and then you get tired, you fall into dullness, you get some coffee and you go back into, excitation again. This person dwells between the fangs of mental afflictions. It's a very vivid image. And what he's saying here in modern vernacular is your psychological immune system is shot. Now we know if your physical immune system is shot and you sit next to somebody on an airplane who has a cold, guess what? You're going to get a cold. Right? If your immune system is strong, you wind up leaving the airplane and healthy and remaining healthy. Same virus, you're exposed to the same virus. Maybe they sneeze right at you. But not everybody who's exposed gets a cold. And that's not only for the cold, but many, many other diseases. If your immune system is down, well, of course, pretty much anything can kill you. And if it's up, other people may be getting cholera, getting all kinds of stuff, and you may not. Right? So that's physical. We all know about that, and then we emphasize keep your immune system strong, 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 strong. And then we have no reference at all, even the notion. Has anybody seen a clinical psychology textbook that refers to your psychological immune system? Anybody? Anybody? Why not? It's more important to us than our physical health. And I just talking, just LA, La La Land, goofy stuff. Or is this actually something that is meaningful? That is, if you encounter somebody who's belligerent, arrogant, aggressive, and they launch into you, do you become defensive, angry, defensive, sad, angry, agitated, and so forth? In which case, then your immune system's down. Because you caught what they had. If the person next to you, or maybe you're going on vacation, is just full of craving, hedonic craving, and so forth and so on, are you going to fall into the same thing? If they're very jealous, if they read the news, they watch the electoral campaigns in the United States, they start filled with contempt and disgust and hatred, do you fall into the same thing? They're contagious. You don't get theirs, but theirs triggers yours, because we all have the seeds for these, right? And these are mental afflictions. Whoever's running for president of the United States, if we're feeling contempt, that's our mental affliction, not his problem. Right? It's a mental affliction. It's contempt, hatred, revulsion, disgust. That's incompatible with loving kindness. So it doesn't matter who's running. That's our mental affliction. Right? Simple. So what can we do to bolster, to strengthen our psychological immune system? So even if people around us are displaying them in spades, that is, flamboyantly, like mob mentality, it's happened in multiple cultures, where it's okay to wipe out a whole race. It's okay to wipe out Jews. It's okay to wipe out Native Americans. It's okay to treat black people as luggage. It's okay, because we all agreed. We all agreed it's okay, therefore it's okay, right? But not everybody. Not everybody. Not everybody. That's the hope. Not everybody in America thought it was just fine. Not all the Germans in Australia. Not all, by any means. Not everybody thought enslaving other human beings was okay. Some people not. They didn't fall. How come? They didn't succumb. Everybody else around them thought it was fine. They didn't. Those people we need to learn about, because they're the hope for humanity. The other ones are low psychological. They'll follow a monster. So I'm not referring to one country, I'm referring to multiple countries through history, because their psychological immune systems are down. This is how to bolster your psychological immune system, develop shamatha. Because when it's down like that, that's about how much vulnerability you have. You're a dandelion seed in the wind. You're blown away. Right? So the stakes are high here. And when he says you dwell between the fangs of mental affliction, that's not a happy image. So we go from Shantideva to another one of the greatest of the greats, and that is Atisha, in his Bodhipatta Praditam, and that is the lamp for the path to enlightenment by Atisha. And he writes, in this again classic text, the root of all Lamrim literature, stages of the path literature in all schools of Tibetan Buddhism, this is it. This is the first one. He wrote it for Tibetans. And he writes, without the achievement of shamatha, extrasensory perception does not occur. And again, footnote, not robustly, not continuously, not dependently, doesn't occur. You need that. Accordingly, without the power of extrasensory perception, the mind is incapable of performing its tasks. In other words, your mind is not serviceable. That's what they're really saying. They say it in so many words. I think at one point, Tsongkhapa says, once you've achieved shamatha, now you have a mind. Was until before then, the mind had you. The mind jerks you this way, jerks you that way, tramples you, beats you up, mugs you, gives you a sugar candy, and then beats you up again. But who's in charge? You or your mind? Well, shall we practice mindfulness breathing for another 24 minutes and find out who's boss? Okay. So there he is. He's laying it out. This is necessary. So far we have Shantideva, Atisha. Both of these are universally regarded as tremendous authorities in all schools of Tibetan Buddhism and among their Indian peers. Atisha was a great renown. He was tremendously revered in India. And Shantideva goes without saying. So, and then the Suraleka. This is, now we've gone into Nagarjuna. So we're hitting the heaviest, the heavies in the Indian Mahayana tradition. The next one, Nagarjuna. This is Suraleka, Letter to a King. Letter to a King, one of his great classics. And there he writes to the king, without jhana there is no wisdom. Well, he's referring to the six perfections. The sixth perfection is jhana, the perfection of jhana, of the fifth one, and the sixth perfection is wisdom. And he says you don't get to the fifth without the sixth. Right on the top. Without jhana there's no wisdom. That's kind of like not very open to interpretation. I mean, that's what he said. That's Nagarjuna. So there are many people nowadays who are dismissing, marginalizing, or even ridiculing shamatha. And that's fine, but then you have to know that you are ridiculing and marginalizing Shantideva, Atisha, and Nagarjuna. So you're welcome to do that, but if you're calling yourself a Mahayana Buddhist, and you look like an idiot. So Karma Chagmé, now we're back to the Kagyu tradition. The benefits of shamatha, this is like, believing in relativity theory, but thinking Einstein was kind of a nitwit. It doesn't just one or the other. Either let him be a nitwit and don't believe in relativity theory, or believe in relativity theory and give the guy a break. He invented it. He knows what he's talking about. So the benefits of shamatha are immeasurable. Craving for mundane activity is averted. Just generally speaking, your hedonic fixation really is subdued. It's tamed, it's intimidated. It's really calmed. For a very simple reason, you found something so much better. That there's no asceticism here. There's no asceticism at all. It's just like, if you've experienced the bliss of your own substrate consciousness, and then you come out and look at what people in the desire realm regard as bliss, you say, but what do I need that for? You're all dining at McDonald's, and I'm dining at a 3-star hotel, a 5-star hotel with a 3-star restaurant. I mean, why would I want to eat junk food when I've got this? I've got gourmet food here. And you people eat. So, you're no longer attached to McDonald's. Yeah, you're right. The pleasures of the desire realm are junk food. They're bad for you, but they're also very addictive. So shamatha is the remedy. Okay? Because you got something better. It's not like you become some really kind of austere, dried up, tight-lipped monk. I've got renunciation. You're not like that at all. You're a really happy camper. And what do you need that for? So there's the first one. That's one of the 5 obscurations, fixation on hedonic pleasure, fixation on the allures of the desire realm, out for the count. It's like you want to stick one right to the jaw, on the floor, out. So that's averted. Many avenues of concentration or samadhi open up in your mind stream. You now have a serviceable mind. For the first time you have a mind that is fit for action, which means you can enter into the samadhis of the 4 immeasurables, of bodhicitta, of Vipashyana. A wide array, they're right at your fingertips now. I mean, it's kind of like, come on in, the water's fine. Because you've got a mind that can enter into any of these effortlessly, very effectively. Mental afflictions, kleshas, are calmed. They use the words very carefully here. This is professional literature. This is not a popularized document. This is the straight professional literature. It's important to recognize that. Mental afflictions are calmed. It doesn't mean they're dispelled, eradicated, uprooted. It means you've knocked the wind out of them. They're really subdued. They arise very rarely, and when they do arise, they don't have much punch. They don't have much ability, power. So they're still there. They can come back, but they're really intimidated. Or, speaking anthropomorphically, or again, your psychological immune system is so robust that they have a hard time getting a handhold, getting you in their grip. Right? So compassion arises. In a way, this is kind of intuitively obvious. You can imagine that if you've come to this place where when you just go into your room, you sit down, you just effortlessly, you go right into samadhi, and you emit effortlessly anytime you wish. You slip right into the substrate consciousness. You experience bliss, luminosity, non-conceptuality. And you can stay as long as you can like. You can go back whenever you like, and it's effortless. And you get all three simultaneously, bliss, luminosity, and non-conceptuality. And then you come out of meditation, you look, and what you got? You know, what does everybody else have? And you see them scurrying around for more money and trying to get a bit more sex and a bit more food and a bigger house and a bigger car and the latest cell phone. And jeez, you poor people. You're looking out there for something, for thrills. We call that luminosity where I live. You're going out there for pleasure. I call that bliss. You're going out there to buy, put a big extra security around your house, and you bought life insurance and so forth. Have a sense of safety. I call that non-conceptuality. And none of yours work. And all they're guaranteed to fail. And all of this ends in sadness. And you're all running around like deers in the headlights, thinking this is going to work out well. This is going to go great. I'm going to be happy. And I can already see the end of the novel. And that gives rise to compassion. Gyatso Rinpoche, who's now 91, 92 years old. The last message I've seen from him, sent out from his Dharma Center, is very touching. He's very frail. Very frail. And he said, all these activities of the world, they're like child's games. Everything's going on like child's games. So you feel compassion. Compassion arises, even without having to cultivate it. I mean, just like, wow. Wisdom realizing the meaning of emptiness, this also arises. I mean, you're primed for it. You're right next door. Geshe Ngāmatārgye again said, when he went into Vipashyana, because of course that's what he taught in the Lam Rim, the first teaching he gave us. He covered everything prior to Shamatha, then he discussed Shamatha in detail, then he went to Vipashyana, insight, wisdom. And he commented, if you've achieved Shamatha, Vipashyana is easy. He said that. Achieve Shamatha, Vipashyana is easy. So we've cited Shantideva, Atisha, Nagarjuna, and now we go to one of the Prajnaparamita treatises. It's a sutra. Papaduma, yeah. So is that 7? Yep, that's 7. This is one of the great Mahayana Perfection of Wisdom Sutras, the Prajnaparamita Samjaya Gata. So now we're into Perfection of Wisdom. Let's see so what does he say here? What does the Buddha say here? Due to jhana, you disparagingly reject the attractions of the desire realm. They just have no taste for you. You turn away from them casually, with no interest. And you manifestly accomplish reasoning, extrasensory perception, and concentration. The reasoning I put down before, I'm not quite sure what that means, but I think I do. Reasoning, that is your mind, your intelligence works really, really well. Noise to signal ratio. A lot of our stupid reasoning, illogical reasoning, because of a lot of noise. Bias, prejudice, crap, preconceptions, unexamined assumptions. It's noise. It's lots and lots of noise. Calm all of that down. Scrape it off down, all the way down to the substrate consciousness imbued with the 5 dhyana factors, and that includes coarse investigation and subtle analysis. Those are two of the 5 dhyana factors. And you have them at your fingertips, and now you have them uncluttered. Coarse investigation, subtle analysis, bliss, well-being, and single-pointed focus, single-pointed attention. Those are the 5 dhyana factors. They're now at your fingertips. So yeah, you should be reasoning more clearly. Because the mind is clean. It's gotten well cleansed of all those obscurations. And you achieve extrasensory perception and samadhi. Okay? Back to the Bodhisattva, Shantideva states, recognizing that Vipashyana combined with Shamatha overcomes mental afflictions, ... So he's showing here, if you want not only to subdue mental afflictions, but overcome means eradicate irreversibly. That's exactly what it means. No knowledgeable Buddhist reads that in any other way than overcomes. This union of Shamatha Vipassana is designed, this is liberation, this is eradication, expulsion, total abandonment, so no matter what happens to you, in this or any future lifetime, they can never, ever, ever return. That's what overcomes mean. And it happens with the union of Shamatha and Vipassana. So then, that's Shantideva. He speaks with tremendous authority. But then we'll just go right back to a sutra, the Dhammasangiti Sutra, one of the great classics, back to the teachings of the Buddha. The mind settled in equipoise, this of course is referring to samadhi, to shamatha, sees reality as it is. It leads right up to and invites you into the practice of Vipashyana to know reality as it is, to realize the unconditioned, to realize nirvana. Due to seeing reality as it is, this is again an ontological insight into the nature of emptiness, into the nature of nirvana. Due to seeing reality as it is, the mind of a bodhisattva dwells in great compassion for sentient beings. And now you know exactly what great compassion is. We had a 24-minute immersion in that, yeah? So there's not just a lot of compassion, it's something very specific. And he said, bodhisattva, this is not on the Shravaka path. This is bodhisattva path, great compassion, maha karuna. Maha karuna. One more. Another great classic, the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara. This is one of the 5 works of Maitreya, again considered to be absolutely definitive for all schools of Tibetan Buddhism. One of the great classics. It was, let's say, written down, transmitted by a Sangha, but the source is Maitreya, the ornament of the Mahayana Sutras. Mahayana Sutra Alankara, one of the 5 works of Maitreya, Doregen, states, so again, absolutely authoritative, by this very jhana, all living beings are established in the 3 kinds of enlightenment. By this very jhana. So at least the first. Because if you haven't achieved the first jhana, you haven't achieved jhana at all. There's the first jhana, second, third, fourth. Beyond that you have the absorptions called the samapatis. So by this very jhana, at least the first, all beings are established in the 3 kinds of enlightenment. So whether you want to become a Shravaka Arhat, you need jhana, at least the first. If you want to become a Pratyeka Buddha, then you need at least the first jhana. If you want to become a Buddha, you follow the Bodhisattva path, you need the first jhana. All beings are established in any of these 3 types of enlightenment. So, time to pause a little bit, because we've just hit solid gold. I mean, it just doesn't get any better than that for the whole Indo-Tibet, all of the whole Mahayana tradition, India, Tibet, Mongolia, everywhere. And this goes out into Chinese Buddhism and so on. He just couldn't have drawn on more authoritative, profound, august, extraordinary individuals, including the Buddha himself, Shantideva, Atisha, Nagarjuna, Maitreya, Asanga. It just doesn't get any better than that. And they're all saying the same thing. So one might think then that those following Mahayana tradition would be really strongly emphasizing shamatha. One might come to that wild conclusion. Oddly enough, that's not the case. And when you go to the Theravada tradition, it's very common to find Vipassana centers everywhere, all over. Sri Lanka, Burma, Thailand, America, Argentina, Brazil. Vipassana centers everywhere. It's wonderful. Shamatha, or in Pali it's Samatha. Well, there are multiple schools within Southeast Asian Buddhism, within Theravada Buddhism. One very prominent, very loud voice is from Burma, from a school there, in which the principal teacher there, who's now passed away, Mahasi Sayadaw, stated, well, you don't really need shamatha, despite everything we just read. Don't need really shamatha, vipassana is enough, dry vipassana. And in terms of samadhi, well, momentary samadhi is enough. Momentary samadhi. And so they pretty much skip shamatha and go right to vipassana. And this really got very popular, because who doesn't like a shortcut, after all? I like shortcuts. Who doesn't like a shortcut? If there's a long way, an arduous way, and then a straight way that's easier, who's going to take the long way? You have to be stupid. So, starting in the 1960s or so, then vipassana, vipassana, vipassana. So we had Western going to Burma and to northern Thailand, vipassana, vipassana, vipassana. Hardly any shamatha. And then what's vipassana? Well, I've read a lot of the literature, and I've trained with teachers. One trained in Thailand, another one in Burma, another one in Sri Lanka. So I'm not entirely out of the loop. And in the popular literature, now we're dealing with this. There's the professional literature, and then what happens though if you want to bring this back to the West, where people have jobs and they have full-time, and they have maybe children, and maybe they're Christian, maybe they're Jewish, maybe they're agnostic, maybe they're atheist, maybe they're materialist, and you want to bring in the customers, Frank. I'm going to be really blunt here. You want to bring in the customers. Then you better make this accessible to a wide range of people. So popularize it. Don't make it too complicated. People will be confused and they won't come back. So simplify it. Dumb it down. Commodify it. Commercialize it. And then Vipashyana winds up being equated with mindfulness. Well, that's just flat out false, but if you tell people who don't know anything, they'll believe you. That's not even remotely true. It's never been true. There's no school of Buddhism that says that. Otherwise, you're practicing shamatha. You're already practicing Vipashyana. Because who can practice shamatha without mindfulness? It's crazy. So now any distinction between shamatha and Vipashyana has vanished. So we just dumbed it down to retarded. And then so there's mindfulness. Well, we have definitions of mindfulness in the Pali Canon, the Theravada, the Indian, and they're very much in accord with each other. But let's dumb that down too. Let's just say mindfulness is just bare attention. Well, that's not true. That doesn't accord with any definition of Buddhism, of mindfulness in any school of Buddhism. But it's simple and people can get it. It's kind of like, oh, I got that. So now if it was retarded, now I don't mean to use this in any, I know it's probably not politically correct, but it's dumb. So you make it dumb by equating Vipassana with mindfulness, and then you make it dumber by equating mindfulness with bare attention. Now this doesn't bear any resemblance to Vipassana. It's not even shamatha. And now we're equating that, and then everybody says it, and then everybody believes it because everybody else is saying it. And it sells. And a lot of people come, and they're all beginners pretty much. And so they come for a 10-day Vipassana retreat, and they're practicing maybe a little bit of mindfulness breathing. I'm not quite sure whether it's shamatha or Vipassana, but they're being mindful. And now let's spice it up a little bit. Let's say, well, because the mind is so distracted, and to calm the mind a little bit, so it's not just going into this wild ruminations and mind wandering, why don't you kind of slow it down a little bit by labeling. So, oh, there's a sound, there's a thought, there's a twinge in my knee. Okay, it's really crude, but if that helps you ruminate less, sure, why not? Anything that works. But then they call that Vipassana. If that's Vipassana, bird watching is Vipassana. And I'm serious. That's a swallow, that's a crow, that's a quail, that's a seagull. Oh, I'm practicing Vipassana. I guess I must be a Buddhist. It just gets dumb and dumber. Why does anybody think just calling a kneecap is Vipassana, or a feeling is a feeling? This is just a very primitive, basic technique to help your mind stop ruminating so much. And now it's called Vipassana. So I remember before, if you call the tail of a dog a leg, is it how many legs does a dog have, Elizabeth? 4. Yeah, just call it, because the word tail already has a meaning, leg already has a meaning. So just calling it a leg doesn't make it a leg. I'm a Buddhist, I like granola. That doesn't make granola Buddhist food. And then we have some Vipassana teachers who went off and studied with Krishnamurti, very interesting guy. He invented a method called choiceless awareness. He's not a Buddhist at all. Doesn't claim to be. But these Vipassana teachers liked it. So what happened? Choiceless awareness is now Vipassana. It's basically whatever they like becomes a Vipassana. Well, come on. Is there any limit to this? Whatever happened to the teachings of the Buddha? Because we've left it behind. Can't even see the trail. So this has become very, very common. If you like it, just call it Vipassana. What the hell? Who will notice? Because we're living in a contemplative, very primitive society. And most people, don't study much, including teachers of Vipassana. Not all, but many. So there's a problem. I was just completely diluting, almost to the point of homeopathic dosage, what Vipassana is. And then shamatha is marginalized. Just, well, never mind that. Just practice momentary samadhi. And then it's commonly stated, I heard this 20, 30 years ago, go into a 1-year retreat or practice Vipassana a year or two, go into retreat, you'll probably become a stream enterer. with no shamatha, no dhyana. And then we find people calling themselves stream enterer, regarded as stream enterer, or even once returner, and then totally screwing up, getting in sexual misconduct and so forth. And now we have stream enterers and once returners and so forth screwing up physically in sexual misdemeanors and other crap. And it makes all of Buddhism look like stupid and degenerate. These are not low stakes. This is a tradition that's been around for 2,500 years and we're fucking it up in one generation. I'm sorry, that's really crude language. But I think this is really crude what's being done. Because everything gets, the credibility of the whole tradition gets screwed. You know. So I do not feel equanimity about this. This has to be called. Call it. If what I'm saying is wrong, then good, show me. Show me your sources. If one thinks it's different than the Theravada tradition, I've just put online 2 outstanding works. One is by an excellent scholar. He's a Theravadan scholar named Kaminda Thera. He's really, really good. And he wrote about a 90-page long essay on Samatha Vipassana in the Pali Canon. And I think he definitively shows the first jhana is indispensable. This whole notion of momentary samadhi being sufficient is just not correct, let's put it that way. And it's proven not to be direct by pointing out one person after another and claiming they've claimed stream enterer, and then they haven't. They clearly demonstrate they haven't, by their behavior. So it's showing empirically that they're wrong. And then Kaminda Thera shows with his enormous knowledge of the Pali Canon and the commentaries, they're wrong in every way. The scriptures, logic, and experience, it's wrong. It's a big mistake. And he wrote an essay specifically on that. Taking up this position, is momentary samadhi sufficient? He said, no, you completely decontextualize Buddhaghosa's reference to momentary samadhi. He placed this very high, very late in his text, assuming you've already achieved jhana. And you take it out of context, you dumb it down, and then tell everybody this is enough. Well, if it were enough, then why didn't Buddha just have 2 higher trainings, ethics and wisdom, and throw out the middle one? He didn't. Why did the Buddha, throughout the whole course of his teaching, emphasize jhanas, how enormously important this is? Why would you do that if anybody got a quick fix, momentary samadhi, that's enough? And why did the Buddha never mention it? He mentioned jhanas innumerable times. Where's the point where the Buddha said, oh yeah, momentary samadhi, that'll do you? There's nowhere there. So this is kind of discouraging, for people who really cherish the enormous majesty, the depth, the efficacy. It's like medicine that works, and then we're finding this stuff. This is like sugar. This is placebo. Makes you feel better. But the Buddha Dhamma is lost, and you don't even notice it, because people who are presenting themselves as speaking with authority are completely misrepresenting the very nature of Vipassana and the relationship between Shamatha and Vipassana. That's really too bad. I think it's shameful. Sorry, but I really do. These are precious teachings. And this is not confined to Mahayana. This is core Theravada. There's no difference. No difference at all. And then we go to Shamatha, we go to jhana, and the same doggone thing has happened. If you look at the Pali Canon, it's very clear. If you achieve the first jhana, here it is. This just cannot be debated. If you fully achieve the first jhana, the 5 obscurations are down. They're out for the count. Any kind of sensual craving, forget about it. Ill will, not happening. Not eradicated, but it's subdued. It's like you you chloroform them all. They're just out. Laxity and excitation, laxity and dullness, not happening. Excitation and anxiety, not happening. Afflictive uncertainty, not happening. And the 5 jhana factors, robust, durable. You've got them. They're your tools. There cannot be any disagreement by any knowledgeable person on this point. Somebody contacted me just recently. His teacher told him he had achieved the first jhana. He said, I've achieved the first jhana, but I'm experiencing enormous lust. What shall I do? I don't like being critical. I don't find it fun. I like talking about Andre Linde and not talking about Michio Kaku. Andre Linde had these breathtaking statements about consciousness, and Michio Kaku says there's no mind-body problem because there's no mind. I don't enjoy that. Let's get back to the good stuff, But because this is on the table, and to ignore it, pretend if it's not there, I think is now just wallowing in ignorance and delusion. So not fun stuff to talk about. But it's not me. It's this, it's Buddhaghosa. And so distinctions are being made now. Made up, 20th century manufacture. Well, there's the people saying this with a straight face, well, there's the Buddha's account of the jhanas, but then there's, and that's from the Pali Canon, from the Nikayas, and then we have Buddhaghosa. As if these are two, like Buddhaghosa was smoking dope and he came up with, something, another version. There is no commentator in the whole history of the Theravada tradition who compares to him. And he was living 1,500 years ago when Buddhism was robust. There were people achieving all over the place. Jhanas, achieving arhatship. I mean, it was really, really strong. 5th century, India, it was really strong back then. Much stronger than it is now, anywhere on the planet. And moreover, he's not just some clever guy. He was a great systematizer. And he did it with enormous erudition. Not only on a thorough knowledge of the suttas, all the Vinaya, the suttas and Abhidhamma, but also he cites so many accounts of yogis in that tradition, achieving this, achieving that. His path to purification is just filled with narratives of individuals achieve this, that, and the other thing. So it's rich with the oral transmission, enormous erudition, and the most brilliant systematizer of the Theravada tradition in history. And now we have 20th century people, in the 20th century, the age of materialism, and we're saying, some of them are saying, Buddhaghosa got it wrong. We got it right. We're actually looking right at the teachings of the Buddha. And of course, their notion of the Buddha's teaching, of course, is orders of magnitude less than what Buddhaghosa came up with. So they tell you, you've achieved the first jhana according to the Pali Canon, but not Buddhaghosa. No, that's something separate. And thinking that's better. Well, anybody heard the difference between gold and fool's gold? Gold, and I checked that out on the internet, it's iron pyrite. Pyrite. It's just a mineral, but if you really don't know minerals at all and get it in the right light, it looks like gold. But if you try to sell it like gold, people will laugh in your face because it's fool's gold, right? There are people nowadays teaching jhana weekends, telling you in a weekend you can achieve a jhana. How many? In a weekend? Or I heard one East Asian teacher giving a 1 month seminar in the Bay Area and telling people they'd achieved jhana in a month. Then they lost it somehow. Funny that, like spare change. Pick it up, lose it. It's making this a whole like a farce, where you can't take anything seriously. Because they're drawing these pseudo-distinctions between the majestic, definitive, incisive, precise, amazing writings of Buddhaghosa, drawing on the first 1,000 years of Buddhism when it was its strongest in the Theravada tradition, overwriting him, say, no, I don't look at him, I just go to the Pali, as if our insight's going to be greater in the 20th century. That's just pomposity, almost to an unbelievable level. And then I've heard another pseudo-distinction. A person who claimed that he had achieved the fourth jhana, by training under somebody in Burma. And I said, oh, really? So your breathing stopped, you can remain in samadhi for a couple of weeks? He said, no. I've achieved the fourth jhana, but I haven't mastered it. There's no such distinction. He or his teacher made it up. So you can go walk around thinking, I fourth jhana, but then not have the abilities of the fourth jhana, which we'll see tomorrow. And this is just made up, achieving and mastery. There's no such distinction. They just made it up. So you can walk around thinking you've achieved the fourth jhana when you're not even in the same ballpark. You're not even close. So this is really common. There's fool's gold everywhere, and it's especially in the popular literature, including Buddhist journals. So if one is really actually seriously intent on the path, you really have to distinguish between fool's gold and gold. Because it's very easy to mistake the two. And especially when people presenting themselves as authorities, they give you one more and then I'll stop. 6 o'clock. So, very well-known Vipassana teacher. This was several years back. Practicing for 40 years. Checked his own mind continuum. How he's doing after 40 years of practice. And this is Vipassana with hardly any shamatha. Not legitimate shamatha. Not real shamatha. Maybe pseudo-shamatha. Maybe that. But not the real deal. And his Vipassana is kind of mindfulness. Mindfulness was back to dumb down Vipassana to dumb down shamatha. 40 years of that, and then he checked out his mind stream and found that his mental afflictions were not gone. He checked out with his other Vipassana and Zen buddies and found out he didn't see any evidence that any of them had actually eradicated, were completely free of mental afflictions. Well, okay. So you got two options, you have multiple options there. One is to say, well, maybe we're missing something. We Zen people, we Vipassana people, if after 40 years our mental afflictions are still arising, maybe we should go back to the drawing board and check out, are we missing something important? That would be very humble. Maybe this is just a very long path, and 40 years is like an eye wink, just for a short time. That would be humble, that would be okay. Or you can do what this person did. Well, the Buddha didn't really mean that when you become an arhat, you're free of mental afflictions. He said more, you can manage them. They come up and they don't bother you anymore. So he did a Freudian interpretation, because Freud never thought we could ever be free of neuroses. He did a Freudian interpretation of the Buddha's teachings and said, this is what arhatship is. The mental afflictions come up, but they just don't bother you anymore. Well, I know a lot of people have mental afflictions that don't bother them, and they don't bother them at all. But they don't give a shit. And then he gives out honorary arhat degrees. That, my 40-year-old chums, if we're pretty well handling our mental afflictions quite well, thank you very much. Well, we're just going to give you an honorary degree. You got to be an arhat, and I'm an arhat, and let's all be arhats together. And all those references for 2,500 years in all schools of Buddhism saying that in your arhat you're totally free. Don't take that literally. Take me literally. Breathe deeply, Amen, and do not experience contempt or anger, but compassion. Because these people are not intentionally deluding anyone, but they are self-deluded, and they're deluding an awful lot of people. And if people don't really care about the path one way or another, maybe that's not a big deal. They don't really care about Buddhism, they don't care about refuge, don't care about achieving bodhicitta or reaching the path. Then okay. They don't care, that's okay. Give them whatever you like. Call it secular Buddhism. Call it whatever you like, doesn't matter. If they don't care, I don't care. But if there's someone out there who actually cares, who actually wishes to be free, we should not deceive them. That I feel very strongly. We should know what we're talking about. And if we make a statement, we should know that it's in accordance with the teachings of the Buddha, the great arhats, the great bodhisattvas, and that we're not violating, eviscerating, castrating, and defiling the Buddha Dharma in the 20th century, such that it will be unrecognizable 1 generation, 2 generations away. I can't imagine any greater disservice to Buddha Dharma than that. And if our generation does it, shame on us. That's my feeling. So people are free to disagree. But that's the conclusion I've drawn. Oh, that's so. Enjoy your afternoon. See you tomorrow.